Okay, welcome to our presentation on repeated and regular use, moving into action stage on the road to addiction. My name is Matthew Nuttall, and my partner is,
Jennifer Belt.
and she's going to get us started. Jennifer?
All right, so we're going into the action stage and self-regulated use with addiction. As we know, addiction is an ongoing problematic dependent behavior. The action stage is usually about 3 to 6 months, and it involves like more of a tolerance and a withdrawal component to it, and also loss of self-control. The use can appear sporadic. Sometimes there's abstinence, so sometimes people will get clean and then they'll use again. They'll get clean and then they'll use again. Not all the patterns lead to long-term addictions. Some people are able to resolve it with personal insight and major events. So sometimes it might be like we talked about in class. It might be that maybe a family member steps in, or maybe they go to jail, or maybe something in their life happens. Maybe they have a child. There's a lot of different reasons that they could do this. Self-regulated use is a controlled behavior with few or negative outcomes. And so it's maintained through like the awareness of pros and cons, right? So like sometimes there's pros to addiction, sometimes there's cons to addiction, sometimes there's pros to recovery, sometimes there's pros or cons to recovery. So the biggest part is the conscious raising and self reevaluation, being able to evaluate your life and kind of see like where you're at. Some people lose that awareness, and they're even if they can evaluate their life, their addiction is stronger than actually being able to make those changes. So having strong self-efficacy to help them overcome it, or also if they have a reduced in temptations, sometimes that's changing people, places, and things in order to help them. So protective environments and effective coping help can help. So that's like in treatment, right? Sometimes you move locations, geographical locations. Those can also help with being able to get through. So some of the characteristics of the action stages, like people will focus more on the positives of using. So like that euphoria, they'll reminisce about it, they'll talk about all the positives, and they'll completely ignore like the reality of the things that are going on. Well, it's not that bad. They have plans and decisions that they made earlier to keep moving forward. Some of the habits start to form because the brain is rewarded for using. And so when they relate, okay, if I use this much, this is how I feel, becomes habit forming. More places and situations become a trigger. So sometimes we start to associate people, places, and things with triggers. So maybe if I go to this club, this is what happens. Or maybe when I go around this person, even if I'm clean for a significant amount of time and my old drug dealer shows up, then that could be a relation to a trigger. People tend to justify and explain away the problems that the behavior causes. They'll justify, well, I only use this much, or it's not that bad, or I'm able to keep a job. I'm a functioning addict. That's things that we hear a lot in the places that I work in. I think also Matt can relate to that. So it's harder to believe that they can stop. So they get to a point where it's harder to believe that they can't keep going and being a functioning addict, right? They think that they justify their actions with that. The relationships, the beliefs, and lifestyles start to change to support their addictions. Sometimes they'll switch jobs. Sometimes they'll push themselves away from people, places, and things that might hold them accountable or make them feel uneasy. And these are all patterns that you can look for. Some people are more at risk for addictions. You know, if you have trauma, we talked about that in class. If you have trauma, if you had family that was an addict, or if the genetics of an alcoholic, your risk is a lot higher. So listen, the quantity and the frequency is a big deal. So how often and how much someone uses can determine the severity of it. Majority of the time we start off with a little bit, we build up that tolerance. Once we build up that tolerance, we think that we need more and we need more and we need more. So small amounts can still be dangerous, especially with unknown or illegal substances. So like right now people have fentanyl, but they're lacing xylazine with it, which is a horse tranquilizer, not thinking that they could just use their amount of fentanyl, not realizing that the little amount of horse tranquilizer in it can actually kill them. So tolerance can hide severity. Some seem fine at high levels. Some people build up a high tolerance. They can use a lot of drugs and still function according to them, or they're looking from the outside in. So money and resources can affect how harmful the use appears. If somebody has a lot of money and they don't, like, their life's not falling apart, right? They haven't lost their job. They haven't lost things. It could be very very confusing and to make it look like their habit's not that bad. People will justify their behavior by minimizing things, by not being willing to be very honest and open about how bad things are. Their binge use, it can be hard. It can be just as hard to control as daily use. So binge drinking and stuff like that becomes harder to control. Their social settings may normalize it, right? So if they work at a bar, they might use a lot. Quantity or frequency matter. They don't tell the whole story. The personal, physical, and social factors also may play a huge role. So the biggest things, the big considerations is like, it depends on their beliefs, their expectancies, and attitudes in their addiction. So sometimes family, like if their belief system is like, hey, I was shaped by my family, you know, my parents were always addicts. The culture, sometimes we talked about culture being an influence. And it can also either protect them or increase the risk of addictions depending on what it is and their beliefs about it. So the expectancies is what some people expect the behavior to do for them, right? If they have confidence, it could be a reward. If they have stress, if it relieves stress, we talked about that in class the other day. Coping skills is a big one. Also, their attitude of how they overall feel. Do they feel good about themselves? They feel poor about themselves? Do they have an environment that supports them? I had a picture on the right hand side that talks about like a lot of some very big words that actually can put some pretty core beliefs down on some people. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Jennifer. We'll move into the critical events in becoming addicted to substances. There's three main ones. The first one is the siren's call. This is when a positive experience can either launch the potential addict into full-blown action stage, or a negative experience brings them back out into the pre-contemplation stage. Sometimes a negative experience can push them further into the action stage because of shame and guilt, and I'm not worth it, and it's already too late. Move on to the narrowing behavioral and environmental repertoires. That is when the addiction becomes more of a priority in the subject's life. So things that used to bring them joy no longer bring them as much joy as using the substance, and so they give that thing up for using the substance. And more serious consequences or a silenced alarm. This is when you begin to dismiss certain actions. Let's say, for example, I'm late to a work meeting in the morning, and instead of saying, oh, I was drunk last night and I'm hungover, I say I got a flat tire, I ran out of gas, or I make another kind of excuse. The action in the context of change. So there's 7 of these that I'm going to move through quickly. Personality and psychopathy. Impulsivity is the #1 contributor to addiction. It's that instant gratification that we as addicts love. And then, of course, schizophrenia and other mental illnesses like depression or severe anxiety can also lead to addiction. Family influences, that's parents, right? If my parents are hounding me because of the way that I'm acting, I may use more because I don't know how to deal with that. Or if they're just enabling and they're like, oh, you're going to figure it out, that can also be very detrimental and push me further into the action stage. Interpersonal relationships and significant others. We see countless times that significant others can cause the subject to use more, but sometimes and rarely we do see a significant other being a positive influence and bringing them out of the action stage. Social support for the behavior, that's going to be if I work with a bunch of my coworkers who do cocaine in the morning before work, and that's my network of people, that's more than likely what I'm also going to do. Societal factors. We tried prohibition once. The government tried to make it illegal. It didn't work. Now the biggest thing is that they try and change the price of alcohol. Harm reduction. These are things like Suboxone and methadone. Now, while these are good for a method of harm reductions, they are not solutions to addiction, but simply temporary holds to try and keep the addict safe, a little bit safer while they're working in therapy. And then the heterogeneity, I don't know how to say that word, in the process of change, there has to be multiple prevention stages, or there has to be multiple types of preventions rather than just one, because it's not a global one-all fix-all. Everybody's process of change looks different. Here's our case study. You guys can go ahead and pause and read that case study. And what we came up with was we need to provide an audit, which is an alcohol use disorder identification test, which we have linked to the link to this presentation. We provide an assist, which is an alcohol, smoking, and substance involvement screening test. And then due to the seizure that the potential client for us informed us of, we need to recommend detox for at least 7 days with outpatient treatment to follow. Jennifer, if you want to take this on real quick.
So a big part of recovery, as we know, is connection, right? So the biggest support that they can have, the better and the more successful they'll be. When people are accountable to other people, they're less likely to relapse. Having a bigger support of family, friends, professional guidance, 12-step meetings, there's different pathways to life. And so there is a lot of resources. And that is a really, really big way to help clients, is helping them build their social supports, especially if they've never had any or they don't have any. That could be a huge barrier for them. And that is our presentation.
Thank you.